Hi guys, what we're going to be doing today is our second food Q&A and another kitchen mishap. Now these videos, I'm going to start a playlist, so if you got questions about my recipes particularly, you're going to go to this playlist and go ahead and watch these videos. Today's questions are mainly focused on my gumbo recipe and my 7-Up pound cake. So let's get into it. The first question is about the sour cream chocolate cake. And the question was, can I use Greek yogurt in place of the sour cream in the cake? And the answer to that is actually yes. You can do that. It's not a problem. That's the only thing you possibly can switch out and not have a major problem with the cake. Can I add chocolate chips to your 7-Up pound cake recipe? No, do not add chocolate chips to the 7-Up pound cake recipe. If you saw that video, that cake is already very dense. Now that's just one of the 7-Up cake recipes that I grew up with. It was very dense, and you don't want to add anything else to it like that because it's just going to make it that much more dense. In addition to the fact that baking, again, is a science, and you don't need to mess around with recipes too much because you're not going to know how it's going to turn out until after it's baked. Then you're going to be mad because you wasted your money, all that butter, all that sugar and stuff that you purchased, and you got to throw it out or start all over again. So when you are looking for a particular cake like that, what I suggested to the person in the comments when they asked the question, I told them to Google a 7-Up or a pound cake with chocolate chips. Do something like that. That way you'll have the measurements or the ratios correct and your product will turn out better. Now this is on the gumbo recipe, and I have a lot of sub questions to the gumbo recipe. So the first question is, when I made your gumbo recipe, it didn't turn out right. It didn't look blended together. What happened? Okay, what happened basically was you didn't whisk it together enough or hard enough, or even say fast enough, to get that roux to combine with the liquid that you were adding to the pot. So first things first, if you watch the video, I added the chicken stock directly from the carton to the hot roux that was in the pot. And I had to whisk, whisk, whisk. You're adding a room temperature product to the hot roux that's inside that pot. Oil and water typically just don't mix. You have to make them, in this case, come together. So you have to whisk really hard, and you can't stop. You need to keep on doing it until they combine really well. Now to ease the situation, what you can do is heat up your stock first. Put your stock in another pot, whether it's seafood stock, chicken stock, whatever it is, heat it up in a pot. And then when you combine the roux and the hot stock together, they will blend better. You still gotta whisk. You will not be able to get past that step, but it will come together maybe a little faster if both products are hot. The next question to the gumbo recipe was, did you use filet powder? And for those of you who don't know, filet powder is a standard ingredient in gumbo, and it's ground sassafras root. Not that that really matters, but that's what it is. And yes, I did. It was my bad in editing. It got edited out by accident, but it definitely is in the written recipe, and I put an annotation in the video saying I accidentally cut that out, but it is in there, so don't worry. Next sub question. Why didn't you use okra in the gumbo? The answer is simple to that question. My family can't stand it. I hate gumbo and soups. So why would I turn around, pay all that money for a pot of gumbo, or money for a pot of gumbo, and turn around and put something that I don't like in it? If I was to put okra in my gumbo, none of my family would eat it. Maybe my mother. The only way you might get me to be able to eat it in soup is if you added it the last 5 minutes of cooking and it still has some texture to it where that slime hasn't released yet. Once it's done that, I don't care. And a lot of people are going to say, oh, well, the okra adds thickness. Not mine. I don't need it that way. If my gumbo has to be thick via the okra, leave it out. I'd rather it be soupy. But as you can see, if you go and read my recipe, and I'm going to leave the links below, I gave you 2 types of roux that were going to help you with the thickness or the thinness of the entire gumbo. And I did not rely on okra. So I know some of y'all, I may have stepped on y'all toes, and I'm sorry, but it really is no point to putting something in the gumbo that you do not like. And I'm not going to encourage you to do that. So, but if you do like it, go ahead. If you like it to release all its juices and that slime, go ahead and put it in the middle of the cooking process. If you like it at the end where, if you like it where it's going to have some texture, put it at the end, maybe the last 15 minutes of cooking. So you do have that choice. Me personally, I'm not going to eat it. Next question. Why didn't you use tomatoes? Again, I just didn't want to. It's not that I don't like tomatoes. I've had gumbo with tomatoes. I just prefer not to use it. It's not a problem though. If you want to add a can of diced tomatoes, that's fine. Let me tell you, I probably know about 5 or 6 of my friends, my personal friends, that are from Louisiana, and not one of their gumbos is the same. Not one. So it just depends on what you like and the steps that you take to achieve the ending result. Nothing has to be the same, and it can be tailored to your taste. That's not a problem. And don't ever let somebody try to make you think that it has to be made their way for you to be comfortable with it. It doesn't. The last thing I wanted to show you, let me show you this, and maybe this will help you guys understand where I'm coming from. Check this picture out. This was a pot of gumbo that I made for about 50 or 60 people. My uncle wanted to have a lot of people over, and he wanted to feed them gumbo. I sat down and I asked him, are you sure you want to do this? And he says, oh yeah. Now this is the same uncle that you guys saw in one of my previous videos about how to throw a big party. He throws parties all the time. That particular party in that video was about 300 people. So 50 or 60 wasn't the problem. My problem was the fact that he wanted to serve them all gumbo. And I said, well, the people you're inviting, first things first, you need to see what they're allergic to, because gumbo has shellfish, has crab, and has shrimp. Some people are allergic. So I would please ask you to go, at least when you're starting to invite them, get familiar with their allergies. That way I know how to handle the gumbo. As you can see, that is like, the pot is like 2.5 feet deep. I actually, again, had to stand on the ladder to stir it. I'm only 5'2", so I made it. But my thing is, this is the pot that a lot of us have been brainwashed to think that gumbo has to look like this much. And so that's why I broke the recipe down to a more manageable size recipe, maybe 6 to 8 portions, and it's also affordable. One of the reasons why I did the gumbo video and recipe in the first place was to make the recipe more approachable. That pot that you see, that 2.5 deep pot with all that king crab and all that shrimp and all that chicken and sausage is really over $600. That's how much that pot costs to make. So 1, it needs to be approachable. 2, it needs to be affordable. And me personally, I never got gumbo except once a year when my aunt made it. And again, she spent that kind of money on a pot like that to feed all of us. And it was just, you know, it's expensive. So what I wanted to do was break it down to a more manageable recipe. It's less expensive, and you can make it for about 6 or 8 people. Everybody can eat to their fill, and you might even have some left. The other thing about it, we all come from different backgrounds, and our families make things different. And so sometimes we're told that it's got to be this way or it's not going to be right. Well, you know, that's fine if that person is teaching you how to do it. If they never teach you, then you're going to be stuck, and you're not going to know where to move from one step to the other. So that's why I did that recipe, to make it really simple, really easy. The only thing that I did from making the recipe the way you see it in the video to that big pot that I made for 60 people was the fact that I didn't roast the chicken prior. That pot took me about 6 hours to make, and what I did was I put the diced chicken breast inside the broth and let it cook for 2.5 hours. So that pot consisted of 20 to 25 pounds of king crab. I used about between 15 or 16 pounds of shrimp. I had 12 pounds of chicken breasts. I didn't use chicken legs, but you can use whatever you want. And then I used about 9 pounds of the andouille sausage, and I mixed it between the chicken sausage and the pork, because by the time I was making it, nobody that I knew of that was coming was a non-pork eater, so it was okay for me to put pork in there. And when I put the raw chicken in there, I went on and I just let it simmer for 2.5 hours. And that was the thing. When you put roasted chicken in there, or partially roasted chicken, it's going to cook faster. You know, you'll be able to move to the next step. If you put raw chicken in the gumbo, then that means you can't even taste it for at least 2 hours. Just go ahead and let it cook. Just let it hang out and do its thing. So that's one of the reasons why I did the gumbo recipe, and a lot of people appreciated it. I caught a little bit, you know, darts for doing it, but I'm going to do me anyway. So I at least wanted that recipe to be approachable for some of us who have limited pocket change but want a good recipe. Time for another kitchen mishap, and in the last food Q&A I showed you a picture of my hand all bandaged up, and now I'm going to tell you the story that's connected to that. So one day I was making myself a breakfast sandwich, that breakfast sandwich that I did for you guys with the turkey sausage and the egg and the English muffin. and I was going to work, getting ready to go to work, and I'm making the sandwich. Now I pulled out 2 patties that I had parchment paper in between, and I had frozen that way. And I'm like, oh shoot, well maybe I can just get my knife. And I had just sharpened my knives. Remember, a sharp knife is always better to have than a dull knife. So I took my knife, and I'm standing at my sink. The 2 patties, I put my hand on the top of the top turkey patty. And so I took the knife, and I was in between the 2 patties. And all I did, I knew not to do this. I knew not to do that. But I just wanted a slight wiggle so that I could just pry them apart and keep it pushing. Well, this evidently, between the knife being sharp and the product being with parchment paper in between, it gave me some slip. And I slipped. It was just enough of my hand hanging out on the other side of that turkey patty for the knife to go through my hand. So my knife went through the turkey patty and then through my hand. Now you want to say delayed pain or delayed sting. I knew I had punctured my hand. What I didn't know, that the knife came all the way through, and it came through about, can you see right there, poked out about that much, maybe about a 1/2 inch, 3/8 of an inch out the other side of my hand. So immediately I threw everything away, threw the knife in the sink. I went to my hallway and got a towel to wrap around my hand, and I was mad at myself. I said, I can't believe I did that. That's never happened to me before. It wasn't that I was distracted. It wasn't that I wasn't in a safe position, because I was in an okay position. It was just kind of the couple of elements worked against me. So I take the towel off my hand to see if I had stopped the bleeding, and man, when I looked at my hand, it was like I can actually see the inside of my hand. And so I'm like, man, where is the rest of this blood coming from? And then that's when I discovered I had an exit wound here. And so I still had a little bit of blood coming down my arm. So because I didn't know the nature of it, and I'm like, I don't know what else could happen, I called, you guessed it, my mother. And so I told her, I said, hey, I think I need you to drive me to the emergency room. And she said, well, why? I said, because I stabbed myself in the hand. And she went, girl, what? So she got here, and I showed her my hand. She said, oh yeah, you're gonna need stitches for real. I said, yeah. And it didn't dawn on me right away what else could have happened with this stabbing. I did wiggle my fingers. Something in me told me, wiggle your fingers to make sure you can actually still move your hand. And I could, I did have that ability. So we get to the emergency room, and I fill out the paperwork, and they ask me what happened. And I said what actually happened. I stabbed myself. Don't say you cut yourself, because what's going to happen in the emergency room, they're going to put you behind somebody else with a more serious injury. And so I wanted them to know I have an entry wound and an exit wound, and I need some attention. You know. So they went and whisked me off to x-ray to make sure I had not hit bone. And that was the reason why I kept doing my hands like this. I'm like, well, if I hit bone, I don't think I'd be able to move my hands, my fingers like this. The x-ray turned out fine. I was eventually seen. I had to wait like maybe 30 minutes, 45 minutes, but my hand had stopped bleeding. And so I was okay. And the pain was about maybe a 7. It wasn't a 10. But I have a high tolerance to pain. So I'm going to say for me it was about a 6 or a 7. And they gave me a tetanus shot immediately because I told them I was handling raw turkey. And then they stitched my hand up. I don't know if I should show you guys my actual wound, but I did put that picture up on Facebook of my hand bandaged, and I put the caption of always, always respect your sharp objects in the kitchen. Respect them and pay attention to what you're doing. Don't get distracted. And also, if a knife falls, let it fall. Let it hit the floor. Just stand back. You can always pick a knife up and wash it and continue on with a task. But a lot of people cut themselves too because they're trying to catch a knife or something like that. But this was just a freak accident. It's never happened to me before, and I haven't cut myself either at work or at home in years. So I guess maybe I was due for an accident. I don't know, but all right. I'll see you guys next time in the next food Q&A, and have a great one, everybody.